This video obtained by TMZ shows the back of a black man on a boat during a large party on July 4th. The man is wearing blue swim trunks, similar to this photo of Nolan Wells that was also taken that day.
The boat came back. Nolan didn't. That is the sentence this entire case keeps returning to. 4 words that should not be possible. 4 words that do not make sense to his father, who taught him that if you leave with 5, you come back with 5. 4 words that have not been explained. Not fully, not honestly, not in a way this family can hold on to. In the 17 days since a 4th of July boat trip became the last thing Nolan Xavier Wells ever did, on July 20th, 2026, his family buried him. They buried him inside a church that could not hold everyone who came, with cars lining the streets for blocks, with people standing outside in the Mississippi summer heat, simply to be close to a moment that had already reached far beyond this one stretch of Gulf Coast. They buried him with a $100,000 reward hanging in the air above his casket. They buried him with 2 autopsies still unfinished, a phone inspection still pending, and a contradiction between 2 witness accounts that nobody with the authority to resolve it has resolved. And then, the moment the service ended, the family walked straight from a funeral into a press conference. Because in this case, grief has never been allowed to stand alone. It has always come paired with questions that still need answering. This episode covers everything. The funeral, the eulogy that shook that room, the reward that doubled in real time from a text message sent during a service, the 3 open questions that were sitting in the background of every prayer and every hymn, and the one update that arrived after the cameras packed up and went home. An update that means the next 48 hours in this case may be the most significant since the night Nolan's mother first realized her son wasn't coming home. If you are not subscribed to Crime Case yet, do it now, because what we are about to cover is moving fast, and you do not want to find out about it after everyone else already knows. Let's start with who Nolan Wells was. Because the national conversation around this case has moved so quickly, and covered so much ground in such a short period of time, that the person at the center of it has sometimes gotten lost inside the headline. Nolan Xavier Wells was 18 years old. He grew up in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, a small coastal community east of Biloxi, where people know each other across generations, and a young man's reputation travels with him everywhere he goes. Nolan's traveled well. He was a multi-sport athlete at Ocean Springs High School, graduating in the spring of 2025. His football coach, Jake Bramlett, described him after his death as someone who was so much more than a player, a young man who led by example, treated everyone around him with genuine respect, and worked in ways that were visible to the entire program. On National Signing Day in February 2025, Nolan spoke publicly about continuing his career at Southwest Mississippi Community College, surrounded by teammates who were making the same leap. He called it a blessing. He meant it. The night before he went to Horn Island, he cooked his parents' dinner, baked salmon. His father, Elmore Wansley, gave him a nickname years ago, Mr. Cool Hands, because it seemed like he was catching a touchdown every game. His mother, Christine, described him as protective and nurturing, a young man who hoped one day to have 3 daughters of his own. On the morning of July 4th, 2026, Nolan got on a boat with his friends and headed out to Horn Island, a barrier island roughly 10 miles off the Mississippi Gulf Coast, accessible only by boat, managed by the National Park Service. No facilities, no staff, no communications infrastructure. A popular 4th of July destination. The kind of place a group of teenagers goes to celebrate a holiday and comes home from by sundown. Wells was the only black member of the friend group that made the trip. He was the only one who did not return. His body was found floating off the island's coast on July 6th. The Jackson County coroner confirmed the identification through dental records. The state medical examiner's office conducted an autopsy on July 7th and has been awaiting toxicology results since. No official cause or manner of death has been publicly released. There were no immediate, obvious signs of foul play or trauma on Wells's body, the Jackson County coroner told CNN. But due to the uncertain circumstances, he said, "We asked for an autopsy at the state medical examiner's office so that they could do the full autopsy and be able to tell if there was any foul play or trauma." And then, 4 words went out publicly. No foul play suspected. That is where this story truly began. Those 4 words arrived before the science existed to support them. The toxicology work had not been completed. The full autopsy process was still underway. The kind of finding that requires weeks of laboratory analysis. The kind that requires patience most grieving families do not have the strength left to offer, had not had the time it needed to exist yet. And still, a conclusion was offered to the public as though it had. There is one rule taught above almost all others in death investigation. Do not rule anything out before the evidence rules it out for you. In the eyes of this family and in the eyes of attorney Ben Crump, who was retained in the days immediately following Nolan's death, that rule was broken before the first press conference was finished. We can't have someone in law enforcement saying there was no foul play before there was an investigation, Sharpton said publicly, voicing what the family had been feeling since the very first statement. For Christine and Elmore Wansley, that early statement did not sound like an investigation still unfolding. It sounded like a door closing on a room nobody had actually finished searching. So the family made a decision that no grieving parent should ever have to make in the same week they are choosing a casket. They sent their son's body out of state entirely, to Washington, D.C., for an independent autopsy conducted by a doctor with no ties to Mississippi law enforcement. We had his body flown from Mississippi to Washington, D.C., because his family wanted to make sure that they had a doctor who had no ties to Mississippi law enforcement to do an independent examination of their son's body, Crump said. That decision delayed the funeral. It delayed their ability to say goodbye. It asked them to hold their grief at a distance a little longer, while they waited for a result that should have come to them, not the other way around. Now there are two investigations running in parallel, on separate tracks in separate cities. Two offices. Two sets of findings being developed by people who have never consulted each other, and a question hanging over both of them that no one has been able to answer yet. What happens if they do not agree? If the state's findings and the independent findings describe two different stories, this case does not move toward resolution. It moves toward something far heavier. Two competing truths, and a family caught in the space between them, still waiting, still holding their breath. And then there is the phone. Nolan's phone did not stay with Nolan. It traveled back to the mainland on the boat with his friends. The family did not receive it from law enforcement. Christine tracked it down using a monitoring application and retrieved it herself. When she looked at what was on it, both of Nolan's Snapchat accounts were empty. Not sparse, empty. No photos, no videos. Nothing saved from the 4th of July. A day that, by every account of everyone who knew him, Nolan would have been documenting continuously. It wasn't even 24 hours, Christine said publicly. Snapchat content disappears after 24 hours, under normal circumstances. She had the phone before that window closed. There was already nothing there. I know when kids get together for events like that, they're snapping, she said. They are making videos, taking pictures, and I'm just like, where is it? Sharpton questioned publicly why Wells's phone and keys were found with his friends, why they had not immediately called police after realizing he was missing, and why local officials appeared so quick to dismiss the possibility of foul play. Attorney Ben Crump made a formal request on the record. If Nolan's phone was going to be examined, then every phone that was present on that trip deserved the exact same scrutiny. Not one device held to a different standard than the rest. Every phone, every person, applied evenly. Because anything less invites the question this family has been asking quietly since the beginning. Is everyone in this story being looked at the same way? As of the most recent confirmed reporting, there is no public confirmation that the other phones have been examined. No timeline, no results. Just a request sitting inside a process the public cannot see into, while a family waits on the other side of it. There is also a contradiction that has never been resolved, and that sits at the heart of everything else in this case. Two people who were both present on Horn Island that afternoon have given two directly conflicting accounts of the last thing Nolan said out loud. His friends have said that Nolan told them he was going to stay behind on the island, that he intended to remain there with a young woman he had met that day, and that they believed he would find his own way back to the mainland. The young woman, referred to publicly only as Katie, has told a different story. Attorney Ben Crump said, a young woman he was talking to, says that Nolan said he was going back to get on the boat with the boys. The boys say that Nolan told them he was going to stay and talk to the young woman. It's a contradiction. One of them is telling the truth, one is not. Both accounts cannot be accurate. That is not interpretation. That is a simple, factual reality. Two people who were both there have produced two versions of Nolan's last known words that cannot be reconciled. But here is the detail that has been lost in almost every public argument about this contradiction. According to Christine Wansley, she and Katie sat down together face to face this week. Not through relatives, not through a Facebook post, not through a second-hand account filtered through someone else's memory. An actual conversation, in person. What Katie told Christine in her own words did not match the account Christine had been hearing from everyone else. And Katie was careful about something that matters enormously. She never actually saw Nolan get on that boat. She is not claiming to have watched him walk back toward his friends after they said goodbye. She is saying he told her his plan, that he intended to rejoin his friends, and that she believed him. And then she walked toward her own boat and went home. That is not an eyewitness account of what happened next. It is an honest account of what she witnessed directly, and an honest acknowledgement of the limits of that witness. What it leaves is a gap. A real, unresolved, unaccounted for gap between the moment Nolan told Katie his intention and whatever actually happened in the hours after she walked away. That gap has not been filled, not by investigators, not by the friends on the boat, not by anyone. Those were the three open questions sitting in the background of every prayer said inside Center Point Church on July 20th. A conclusion offered before the science existed to support it. Two parallel autopsies with no guarantee they will agree. And phones, including Nolan's own, that may hold the clearest human record of what happened on that island, sitting in an evidence process the public cannot see into. Now here is what actually happened on that day. Visitation began at 9 a.m. at Center Point Church in Ocean Springs, followed by the funeral service at 11 a.m. A private section was reserved for family and friends, while the service remained open to the public. Filmmaker Spike Lee and NFL player Terrell Owens were in attendance. Tyler Perry had paid for the funeral services entirely, quietly and without seeking attention for it. Colin Kaepernick had already funded the independent autopsy the family commissioned in Washington, D.C. Christine Wansley stood before the congregation and said, "Thank you for the joy he brought, not only to our family, but also to his friends and everyone in the community whose lives he touched." Nolan had such a gentle, calming spirit about him. She described her son as protective and nurturing, noting that he had hoped to have 3 daughters one day. His father, Elmore Wansley, was overcome with emotion as he recalled his son on the football field. "I nicknamed you Mr. Cool Hands," he told the congregation, "because it seemed like you were catching a touchdown every game. We will miss everything about him," Christine said through tears. From his quiet nature to the corny jokes, his gentle smile, the way he made everyone around him feel comfortable, loved, and at ease. "Your absence has left an emptiness that can never truly be filled. A piece of our hearts will always be missing. We will continue to fight for you." That last sentence, "we will continue to fight for you," was not a figure of speech. It was a statement of intent from a mother who has been fighting for answers since the night this began and has no intention of stopping. Then Reverend Al Sharpton stepped to the pulpit. Sharpton has stood in that position more times than anyone in this country should ever have to. He has delivered eulogies for families who came to him as a last resort. Families who felt that without his presence and his voice, their son's name would simply disappear into a case file and never emerge again. He understood exactly what he was being asked to do in that church, and he did not deliver a quiet service. He questioned publicly, from the pulpit itself, why Wells's phone and keys were found with his friends. He questioned why they had not immediately called police after realizing he was missing. He questioned why local officials appeared so quick to dismiss the possibility of foul play. And then he reached back into the history of the state he was standing in. He spoke the name Emmett Till. He spoke the name Medgar Evers. "Some of us remember what happened in Mississippi," he said. "Before we can medicate and heal today, we've got to look at your history." Those names did not land lightly in that room. Emmett Till was 14 years old when he was murdered in Mississippi in 1955. Medgar Evers was a civil rights leader assassinated in his own driveway in Jackson in 1963. By placing Nolan Wells's name beside theirs, Sharpton placed this case directly inside a history that Mississippi has never fully reckoned with, whether the congregation was ready for that or not. "I do not think that it is appropriate for either side of opinions to prevail without the backing of that investigation," Sharpton said, urging restraint even as he demanded accountability. "We don't want nothing sugar-coated either way, but for an 18-year-old young man to no longer be with us, we want answers." And then, in the middle of laying a child to rest, Sharpton turned from grief to action. "I want to put up a reward of $50,000 for anybody that could give the information that will lead to an arrest and a conviction in the case of what happened," he announced from the pulpit. He was not on that island by himself. Somebody saw something and knows something. "I didn't come to make money, I came to give money." Before the words had finished settling over the room, Sharpton revealed that Tyler Perry had texted him from wherever he was watching, offering to match the pledge in real time. $50,000 became $100,000. "We just want the truth," Sharpton said. "That's all. We just want the truth, and we want to thank Tyler Perry. Let every stone be rolled back, and every veil be torn asunder," Sharpton continued, "and let truth pop out of the ground like a flower." Attorney Ben Crump then stepped forward and led the congregation in a chant, Nolan's life mattered, repeating it again and again, row by row, until it carried through the open doors and into the parking lot beyond, where people who had not been able to find a seat inside had gathered simply to be near the moment. Christine Wansley closed with a final message to her son. As long as we continue to remember him, his light will continue to shine through us. We love you, Nolan. The service ended. The crowd began filing out into the Mississippi afternoon, and the family did what they have done more than once since July 4th. They walked straight from a funeral into a press conference. Standing outside Center Point Church in front of a bank of cameras that had been rolling for hours, Attorney Ben Crump confirmed what had been agreed to in the meeting with the Jackson County District Attorney days earlier. A mutual inspection of Nolan's phone, the family's own independent experts working alongside Jackson County investigators, examining the same device together, rather than in separate rooms producing separate conclusions to be disputed later. And then Crump gave the room a detail that had not been widely known before that afternoon. It took 6 days. 6 days between the state conducting its official autopsy on July 7th, and the moment the family's independent examiner in Washington, D.C., finally received Nolan's body. 6 days in a case already defined by urgency and its absence. 6 days that deepened the family's sense that time had not been on their side from the beginning. A reporter asked whether the independent autopsy results were ready. Crump's answer was careful and honest, and not what anyone in that crowd wanted to hear. Not yet. The findings were still being finalized. We are looking forward to our meeting with the district attorney this morning, Crump had said earlier in the week. Nolan's family still has no answers about how their son went to Horn Island and never came home. A thorough investigation must be completed, and the district attorney must put every relevant fact before the grand jury. Nothing held back, nothing overlooked. A reporter turned the conversation toward the other phones. Whether the devices belonging to every teenager who was on that island would receive the same scrutiny as Nolan's. Crump confirmed that request had already been formally communicated to the district attorney's office. Fairness demanded it. What he could not confirm was whether it had actually been carried out. By the time the press conference ended, one fact remained exactly as it had been before the service began. No suspect has been named. No homicide has been declared. No official answers have arrived. What has arrived, again and again, is a family standing in front of microphones. First in the second week of this investigation, then at the DA's office, then outside a church, hours after burying their son, still pressing for information that should have come to them first. Now the update that came after the cameras left. Attorney Ben Crump announced that the preliminary findings from the independent autopsy conducted in Washington, D.C., will be made public Wednesday morning at a news conference held during the annual NOC National Convention in Chicago. Wells's parents are expected to attend. That is tomorrow, Wednesday, July 22nd, 2026. The independent autopsy, the one the family commissioned because they did not feel they could trust the answer they were being given at home, the one that required sending their son's body out of state and delaying his funeral, the one that has been pending while this entire public conversation has been running without it, is about to have preliminary findings released publicly. This is the development that changes the shape of everything that comes next, because right now, both the family's position and the public's understanding of this case are built on an absence of confirmed medical findings, an absence of a determined cause and manner of death, an absence of the one piece of scientific evidence that can speak independently of anyone's account, anyone's loyalty, anyone's fear of consequences. That absence ends Wednesday morning. What those findings say will either narrow this investigation significantly or open it in ways nobody has yet publicly anticipated. If the independent autopsy is consistent with drowning and finds no evidence inconsistent with an accidental death, that does not end the family's questions. The phone, the contradiction, the timeline still exist, but it removes one possible avenue entirely. If it finds something the state autopsy did not, or something that conflicts with the early no foul play statement, the investigation takes a turn that the grand jury will have to grapple with. We do not know yet what those findings say. No one outside the medical team and the family's legal circle does. What we know is that the findings exist, that they are preliminary, and that they will be released in less than 24 hours from the time this episode publishes. We will cover everything the moment it becomes available. Subscribe to Crime Case and turn on notifications, because the next update in this case is not in weeks. It may be in hours. Before this episode closes, the broader conversation around this case deserves to be acknowledged directly, because it has been part of the story from the very beginning, whether any single outlet chose to name it or not. Nolan Wells was the only black member of his friend group on that trip. He was the only one who did not return. Crump has noted that Wells was one of only a few black attendees among the roughly 200 people gathered on the island that day, and has called for investigators to thoroughly examine all evidence before drawing any conclusions. That detail, on its own, proves nothing about what happened on that island. Responsible coverage of this case has said so consistently and clearly, and that standard matters. A photograph is not evidence of cause of death. A demographic fact is not proof of motive. But paired with what followed, a conclusion offered before the science existed to support it, a phone that traveled back to the mainland without the person it belonged to, a contradiction between witness accounts that remains unresolved. That detail stopped sitting quietly in the background of public conversation. It moved to the center of it. Sharpton placed it there, explicitly from the pulpit. Invoking the history of Mississippi, Emmett Till, Medgar Evers, he addressed law enforcement directly. Before we can medicate and heal today, we've got to look at your history. People who have followed this case from the earliest days have done so in part because they recognize something in it that reached beyond Mississippi. Parents of black teenagers have spoken openly about looking at their own sons differently since this story broke. About a group boat trip, the kind of ordinary thing that happens thousands of times every 4th of July, suddenly carrying a weight it never used to carry. That recognition is a significant part of why this story has not faded the way cases like this often do. And it is why the autopsy results being released on Wednesday will be received not just as a medical finding, but as something this entire country has been waiting to hear. Because the question underneath all of it is not complicated. It is not procedural, or technical, or legal. It is the question Nolan's father asked out loud and has never stopped asking. He always said yes, sir, when I told him. If you go with 5, you come back with 5. Why didn't he? This case is not finished. 2 threads carry the full weight of what comes next. The independent autopsy results releasing Wednesday at the NAIC National Convention in Chicago, and confirmation, still pending, of whether the phones belonging to every teenager on that island have been examined the way Nolan's family has publicly and repeatedly requested. The reward is $100,000. It is waiting for the person who decides the truth is worth more than whatever they are protecting. Somebody saw something, Sharpton said. Somebody knows something. If you know anything about what happened on Horn Island on July 4th, 2026, contact Attorney Ben Crump's office or the Jackson County Sheriff's Department directly. And if this episode gave you a fuller picture of what is actually confirmed versus what has been circulating online, subscribe to Crime Case, hit the like button, and share this with someone who has been following the story. We are not going anywhere until this family gets real answers. Christine Wansley's final words to her son, spoken inside that church in front of hundreds of strangers who came from across the country to stand beside her, were simple and absolute. As long as we continue to remember him, his light will continue to shine through us. We love you, Nolan. The boat came back. Nolan didn't. And someone out there knows why.